All right, let's just clear the air right away. Forget whatever you think you know about daily horoscopes. Seriously, throw it out. Today, we are taking a strictly academic, rigorously data-driven look at a concept that is so often misunderstood as mere mysticism. We're talking about mundane astrology, and we're going to explore this as a serious, measurable framework for historical analysis and, perhaps more importantly, future geopolitical forecasting. Throughout this explainer, we'll be examining a massive study titled Celestial Blueprints, a 3-century geopolitical forecast. It basically uses 200 years of observable, highly repetitive planetary patterns to map out the exact structural pressures acting upon our global institutions right now. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the origins of cosmic observation. Second, we'll break down the dual cycle methodology. Third, we'll backtest this with historical crises, focusing on the hard aspects. Fourth, we'll look at systemic integration through soft aspects. And finally, number 5, predicting the next 2 centuries. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, Origins of Cosmic Observation. To really understand our modern geopolitical climate, the source material argues that we have to look way, way back to our deepest ancestral origins. Think about early humans in the African cradle. They existed in a dense, jungle-bound survival environment, right? Their cognitive bandwidth was literally entirely consumed by immediate day-to-day survival. You aren't looking at the stars when you're just trying not to get eaten. But as populations migrated toward the Middle East, a profound environmental shift happened. Look at point 3 on the timeline. They reached the Iranian plateau. Now, these high-altitude environments offered remarkably clear, highly resonant skies. And this specific geography is what allowed early humans to transition from pure, non-scientific survival to the active, rigorous measurement of reality. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a transition. It was the birth of an entirely new cognitive paradigm. For the first time, humans had the bandwidth to engage with structured long-term macro trends and cosmic patterns.
Which brings us to Section 2, the dual cycle methodology.
So, how do we translate ancient skywatching into a practical, structural framework for today? Well, the methodology relies on what we call mundane cycles. As defined here, this is the observational study of long-term planetary alignments used as a predictive model. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, a crucial point of scientific rigor: correlation versus causation. Skeptics rightly question, how could giant rocks millions of miles away possibly force human action? Well, the authors of this study are very clear. They don't. Planetary aspects absolutely do not magically compel human behavior. Rather, they act as a deeply accurate, descriptive metric of the underlying geopolitical climate. Think of it like a cosmic clock. The clock on your wall doesn't cause it to be 5 p.m., right? But it accurately tells you when the workday is over. In the same way, we are mapping historical structural strain and harmonic societal integration based on these observable, repeating alignments. To actually do this, the methodology divides these cycles into 2 very distinct mechanical states. Over on the left, we've got the hard aspects. These are your 90-degree squares and 180-degree oppositions. You can really think of these as the pressure cookers of history. They represent massive structural strain, systemic detonations, and the intense tension that forces outdated systems to ultimately collapse. But then, on the right, we have the soft aspects. These are the conjunctions, the 60-degree sextiles, and the 120-degree trines. This is your release valve. Soft aspects represent integration, harmonic flow, and the consolidation of entirely new paradigms. History, as you'll see, isn't just a series of random disconnected events. It's a highly structured, predictable process of tension and release, constantly oscillating between these 2 mechanical states. I absolutely love how this quote captures the academic posture of the whole study. It says, much like a meteorologist observes high-pressure systems to forecast a storm, we observe these celestial cycles to understand the structural pressures acting upon our global institutions. It grounds the entire methodology in sheer, undeniable pragmatism. You don't blame the barometer for the hurricane, you use the barometer to prepare for the hurricane. All right, Section 3, Historical Crises, Hard Aspects. Let's go ahead and backtest this methodology, because this is where the data gets incredibly specific. Look at the data from 1848 to 1849 there in the first row. We had a Saturn-Uranus square, which is a textbook hard aspect, and it aligned perfectly with the springtime of nations. We're talking massive structural revolutions sweeping across all of Europe. Moving down to the 1929 to 1933 window, here we had a dual hard aspect, a Saturn-Pluto square compounding with a Jupiter-Uranus opposition, and the geopolitical translation of that, tremendous systemic fragility culminating in the Great Suppression and, of course, the subsequent rise of authoritarian regimes. And then in the third row, an era we all vividly remember, 2008 to 2010, a Saturn-Uranus opposition directly coinciding with the global financial crisis, severely destabilizing the post-Cold War order. The crucial takeaway here is the precision. Skeptics might cry coincidence once, maybe twice, but the sheer exactness with which these specific planetary angles align with massive structural strain over centuries, it strongly suggests a highly measurable, extremely reliable mechanism at play.
Moving on to Section 4, Systematic Integration, or the soft aspects.
Just like a literal pressure cooker eventually needs a release valve, geopolitical crises desperately require periods of harmonic response so society can integrate the changes. This is how we actually survive the chaos. Look at the era from 1867 to 1870. A Uranus-Pluto conjunction, a major soft aspect, facilitated massive industrial consolidation and really helped stabilize national identities after decades of civil upheaval. The next row is equally stark. Following the unimaginable trauma of World War II, the 1945 to 1950 era featured a Neptune-Pluto sextile. This harmonic flow supported immense structural rebuilding and effectively paved the way for a golden age of global economic expansion. And in that 2000-2005 period, a Saturn-Uranus conjunction marked a period of transitional growth, allowing the world to successfully integrate all this new global digital infrastructure right before the hard aspect crisis of 2008 hit. So you see, these soft aspects are absolutely vital for the societal maturation required to build new systems after the old ones collapse. And finally, Section 5, Predicting the Next 2 Centuries. Now we project this 200-year framework forward. This timeline is the true practical value of the methodology, utilizing the dual cycle framework as a predictive model for our own future. We start at point 1, which is just around the corner, 2026 to 2030. Here, a Saturn-Neptune conjunction acts as an anchor for a massive global climate realignment. But pay really close attention to point 2. The 2040 to 2045 era brings a Saturn-Pluto square. Remember our historical data from the 1930s? This is a major hard aspect. The model suggests this is going to be a severe pressure cooker phase, intensely testing global governance and resource distribution. We then move to point 3, 2065 to 2072. Another hard aspect, specifically a Uranus-Pluto square predicting a huge scaling crisis that will challenge AI integrity and established global security structures. But finally, relief arrives at point 4. By 2080 to 2095, a Saturn-Uranus conjunction ushers in a long-cycle harmonic growth phase, stabilizing the new infrastructure born from those preceding crises. Pushing even further out into the future, the model forecasts some pretty profound structural shifts for the late 21st and early 22nd centuries. The 2090s all the way through 2120 will focus heavily on the systemic consolidation and maturation of biopower structures. Basically, we're talking about how biology and technology intersect with institutional control. Parallel to this, the model indicates this era will oversee a necessary rescaling of global populations. Then, moving into the early 22nd century, we're going to experience major institutional pivots driven by returning hard aspects, specifically the Jupiter-Uranus and Saturn-Uranus oppositions between 2105 and 2120. History shows us the pattern, and this data-driven framework insists our future will continue to unfold within these exact same structural parameters. Which brings us to the ultimate question. We've seen how remarkably precise the alignments of 1848, 1929, and 2008 were in mapping real-world structural strain. The math is right there on the board. So as we look to the horizon, ask yourself, will our current global institutions actually withstand the impending 2040 to 2045 Saturn-Pluto pressure cooker phase? Or will this celestial blueprint forecast the total detonation of our modern order just to make way for the next era of harmonic integration? It's a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep observing the underlying climate of our world.